This is the Viva Energy Hub, which is it has several components to it. Viva Energy, of course, runs Geelong's oil refinery. The project is multifaceted, and the proposed project, I should say, is multifaceted and consists of the LNG import terminal, and this will require a floating storage and regasification unit, which will be permanently docked at the wharf, and it'll also need a 6.5 kilometre pipeline to connect it to the gas network. So that's number one there on the slide in pink. Second part proposed is a strategic oil reserve, number two there, which I guess, you know, we've heard about all the issues of Australia trying to store oil in the US. Perhaps this is the local alternative to that. Number three is the solar farm and battery, which they're proposing to have a 250 megawatt capacity, and that would supply the needs of only about 25% of the refinery's energy needs. So it wouldn't really have much of an impact beyond its own consumption. And the fourth part of the energy hub being proposed is a potential brown hydrogen production. So that's making hydrogen out of fossil fuels, such as gas, of course, and that has little to no environmental benefits. So in terms of what a FSRU is, basically it's a facility which allows the liquid natural gas carriers to dock and to then transfer their gas. So the FSRU has the ability to regasify the liquid natural gas, which converts it from liquid to gas form. It's double hulled is specially designed and constructed to maintain a very low temperature for that liquid natural gas. When the LNG is converted from a liquid to a gas, the LNG is pumped from tanks inside the FSRU through a series of heat exchangers, and they use seawater from the bay, would then be circulated around the outside of the heat exchangers to warm the very cold LNG, resulting in slow evaporation of the liquid back to the gas. This produces very cold seawater, which the refinery says it may use in its processes within the refinery for cooling, or may need to be returned back into the bay. This process would also require the use of chlorine to avoid algal build-up within the system. The FSRUs are really quite enormous, up to 300 metres long. The refinery says that's about the length of its oil tankers that currently dock there. I'm not sure about that, but it sounds like a fairly enormous kind of piece of infrastructure. Okay. So why is it being proposed? Well, I will let Tim really speak more about the issues with the predictions of gas shortfalls in Victoria. He's the expert there, but suffice to say it's quite, I guess, it's not necessarily a credible claim that we are heading for a gas shortfall. The big concern, I guess, is around the viability of the refinery. It lost $500 million this year due to the reduced demand for its products. And it also supplies about 100%, well, it supplies 100% of Australia's aviation gas. It does employ 700 people, so losing that from Geelong would certainly not be without impact. And that's why we need a planned and a just transition for this industry and also its employees. Viva is trying to give the impression that it has some environmental credentials by installing the small solar farm on the site, but as I indicated, I don't think it's really going to make much impact in terms of even Geelong's electricity needs. In terms of what's the likely process from here, it's not a done deal. This is quite a long staged process, so we're really just at the very beginning of this. There are many potential impacts that the company needs to prevent or mitigate before it would be given approval. So first of all, it needs to decide itself whether it thinks the project is economically and technically feasible before we go even down to the environmental approval stage. It's likely that it could take a considerable time. Oh, sorry. It's likely that it would need to undertake a state government environmental effects statement process before it gained approval. But this is something that I'm looking into with our group working party on it, as to how we get that that process triggered, I guess. Over in Western Port, where they had a similar project, this EES period took 2 years for AGL to work through. So, you know, it's not necessarily a quick process. Interesting, though, that once the company had actually released that EES, the community was only given 30 days to respond to that, and that has just closed today. And they'll be running hearings later on this year for that process over there. So it could be quite a considerably long process, I guess, but it's really quite important that we collaborate with other groups, and yeah, not only within Geelong but beyond, to understand how this process works, and you know, do the proper approvals process, go through the proper process. Okay. So in terms of what are the potential impacts of this project, you can see my little pink arrow there. That's my guess of where roughly the refinery is located. This EES process will have considerable environmental and social impacts it needs to consider, and economic impacts as well. So it's important that we think broadly when we're considering it. You can see that little pink arrow there. It's right very close to Ramsar wetlands, which are at the Lime Burners Lagoon, just the other side of the grammar school. So there are some considerable environmental impacts which we should be considering. So things like the chlorine, which is used in that process to control algal bloom, that may impact local ecology. The cold seawater used in the regasification process may also have an impact on the sea life. There's also the possibility of disturbing potentially toxic sediments when they need to dredge the Corio Bay sea floor in order to make space for this FSRU. So after, you know, decades of Shell leaching away all sorts of things into Corio Bay, that could be God knows what down the bottom there. So we need to be aware of that. So those Ramsar listed wetlands there are quite significant, and there's also, of course, commercial fisheries close by, which may well be impacted as well by some of the pollutants from such a project. Obviously, the greenhouse gas emissions are also very concerning for a project like this, because it would also lock us into gas infrastructure rather than helping us to transition to renewable energy. Not a good use of our resources, particularly if it's being subsidised by our government. Social impacts include things like the recreational fishing. There's a lot of fishermen gather around that part of Geelong. See them there on the weekends. And there's also sailors around that part of the bay as well. And we should also be considering whether there might be significant cultural sites associated with that part of the world for Aboriginal people as well. The economic impacts. Tourists are not going to get a very favourable view of Geelong as they enter the bay if they have gas tankers, if we have gas tankers lined up here. You can just think of all those big tankers steaming past you on the Bellarine there, Vicky. Wouldn't be a very good view. The Spirit of Tasmania has just agreed to move its operations to Corio Quay in 2022. And it's certainly not going to give a great impression of Geelong for those travellers as they enter our bay. There's also questions about whether gas projects really generate many local jobs during the construction phase, as many of those specialist workers who build the FSRUs need to be pulled in from other sites rather than necessarily using local labour. And the industry as a whole, the gas industry as a whole, provides less jobs for the same amount of capital invested compared to almost every other industry. So it's certainly not a great job creator. So there's lots of potential concerns that we can raise with this process. So,
Sal,
yeah.
there's a few people that are commenting about this rather strange black band on the top of your screen share.
Okay.
I'm back online okay now, so maybe I'll share mine.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
Well, that was the one you're at, wasn't it? Yeah.
Yeah.
So go to the next one, or you finished with that one?
No. So is gas a transition fuel? Yeah.
Yeah.
Why can't I need to get my, this is really throwing me. I can't get my
Sorry.
notes back now. I'll just skim over this. So this is the issue of gas as a transition fuel, which we raised in our briefing paper. And these are some of the key points which Neil was very helpful in writing this paper for us, basically. I'm sure that Tim will cover a lot more of these points, but as we're all aware, gas is still a fossil fuel, and there's issues with its production, and even whether we have accurate data regarding its the emissions associated with its extraction. It's well past being recognised as a transition fuel because it's no longer cost competitive with renewables, and those emissions we can't accept any more of them if we're to keep warming below required levels. So these are all covered in our briefing paper, which is now on our website. You're very welcome, and I encourage you to read that briefing paper. It's very thorough, and that's a key document which we have used with politicians, and we will be using that with all levels of government to brief them about the impacts of this gas industry. Okay. So in terms of taking action, the next one please, Vicky. So we've formed a gas-free Geelong working party just in the last few weeks with a few of us here tonight. Mick, Neil, Robert, Liz has joined us recently from Doctors for the Environment. We've been meeting on Friday mornings. If anyone's got a real passion for helping us with this, and particularly skills and knowledge which might be relevant, you're very welcome to join us, and I'll send out details about that group in a follow-up email tonight. We are looking at writing letters to state MPs, so not only as a letter which we've already sent from GS, but you as individuals, we encourage you to also write to our state MPs to express your concern about this project, and we're planning to hold a Zoom letter writing group next Wednesday, the 2nd of September at 4 o'clock. So that will be facilitated by Karen, and I'll be there as well to help with that process. We've already got the template. This will be a fairly simple, easy process. You just need to personalise the letter and tweak it a bit. That'll be really helpful. We just need to get it on politicians' radar that this is something that the community is concerned about. We are also looking at forming a Gas-Free Geelong Facebook page, which Mick is looking into for us, and he'll help drive that. We'd really appreciate if you can also follow us on Facebook and Twitter. Neil and I do a fair bit of Twitter and feel like we don't get too many retweets. So we'd really appreciate the moral support there if anyone wants to jump on Twitter and retweet our very witty and informative tweets. That would be great. And we'll also be aligning ourselves with the Environment Victoria campaign. So that will roll out soon once they've gotten over the Western Port campaign and through that next stage there.